The Verk had a word for the moment a civilization broke. They called it Velmora, the quiet surrender. Every species they had ever encountered eventually reached it. Some took weeks, some took hours. The Velmora always came. Fleet Commander Alvin stood at the center of his command deck and watched the sensor display with the patience of a man who had done this 41 times before. 41 systems, 41 civilizations, 41 moments of Velmora. The mathematics of conquest were simple, overwhelming force, precise timing. Wait. The Calder corridor stretched ahead, a long channel of navigable space between two gas giants, threaded through an ancient asteroid belt. There was no other practical route into human-controlled space. The debris fields on either side were too dense, the gravity wells too unpredictable. This corridor was the door, and Alvin had come to walk through it. One contact sat on the display. A single human warship, holding position dead in the center of the corridor. Sub-Commander Dreth had already laughed when the initial scan came through. One ship, not even a large class, a mid-weight cruiser by their designation, the kind of vessel built for patrol work and short engagements, not fleet combat. Alvin had 47 ships at his back. He opened a standard hailing channel. The response came immediately, which was unusual. Most species made him wait, either out of fear or the hope that delay might change something. The human voice was female, unhurried, and spoke with the particular tone of someone giving directions to a place they know well. "This is Captain Dara Voss of the UES Ironsong. You are approaching sovereign human space. The Calder corridor is closed. Turn your fleet around." Alvin studied the translation for a moment. Then he replied, because he always gave one courtesy. "This fleet represents the Verk Dominion. Stand aside or be destroyed. You have 1 hour." The channel stayed open. He expected silence. Instead, Voss spoke again. "I heard you. My answer is the same. The corridor is closed." Dreth made a sound that was the Verk equivalent of amused disbelief. She pulled up the Ironsong's registry, commissioned 8 years prior, crew complement listed at 312, standard armament for its class. She ran a quick calculation on how long it would survive the opening volley from even 10 of their ships. The number she got back was under 4 minutes. She shared it with the bridge. Several officers relaxed visibly. Alvin did not relax. Something about the exchange sat at an odd angle in his mind. He had hailed species with full battle fleets behind them, and they had trembled in their response. This woman had heard the name of the Dominion and simply repeated her refusal. Not bravado, he knew bravado. It had a sound, a frequency of forced confidence. This was something else. She sounded like she was reading from a list of things that were simply true. He pulled the human file from the Dominion's intelligence archive. It was thin. Humanity was a young spacefaring civilization by galactic standards, roughly 200 years out from their first contact event. Homeworld, a high-gravity terrestrial in a volatile solar system. Biological classification, omnivorous oxygen-dependent bilateral symmetry. Notes on conflict history. He scrolled past the early entries looking for fleet engagements. There were a few. Humans had fought 2 minor interstellar conflicts in their expansion period. They had won both, though the archive didn't have much tactical detail. He closed the file. It didn't matter. 47 ships versus 1. Dreth was running a deeper scan on the Ironsong now, frowning slightly at her display. "The ship has been in position for 6 days, she said. "Before we arrived. They knew we were coming and they sent one ship 6 days early. To give it time to broadcast the closure order to any observers," Alvin said. "A political gesture." Possibly. Dreth didn't sound certain. On the Ironsong, Dara Voss sat in her command chair and watched the Verk fleet's formation on her tactical screen. She had a glass of water on the console beside her, which said something about how she operated. She was the kind of officer who remembered to hydrate in a crisis, which meant she was the kind of officer who had been in enough crises that they felt routine. Lieutenant Oren Staub stood at the tactical station behind her, running threat assessments for the fourth time in 2 hours. Each one came back the same. She didn't ask him to stop. The math wasn't the point. The point was the work, the motion of doing the job, which kept the bridge calm. "They're going to come," Staub said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Dara said. "Fleet's 2 weeks out." "I know." Staub was quiet for a moment. Then, "We've got good angles on the corridor walls. If we mine the eastern debris shelf and force them into a tighter approach vector, we can reduce how many ships fire on us at once." "Start the mining drones," Dara said. That was all. No speech. No ceremony. The crew heard the order and moved. Chief Engineer Priya Nail confirmed drone deployment from engineering with a single-word acknowledgement. Gunnery Sergeant Bale ran his Marine detachment through a quiet check of the internal defense stations. Oven watched the hour expire. The Iron Song had not moved. He was not surprised. He gave the order to advance. The Verk fleet began moving through the Calder corridor, 47 vessels in a deep formation, their hulls catching the dim light of the distant star. The Iron Song held its position. Every sensor on the human ship tracked every Verk vessel with quiet, absolute attention. Dara Voss picked up her water glass, took a sip, and set it down. "Weapons free," she said. "Fire when ready." The first volley from the Verk fleet was not meant to kill. That was the detail Dreth noted in her log afterward. The opening strike was suppression fire, a standard disabling pattern used against every species they had ever encountered. The idea was simple. Hit them hard enough that their systems go dark. Then they call for terms. Then you board. Then you own them. The Iron Song took 3 direct impacts in the first 6 seconds. Then it shot back. The return fire was not suppression. It was not warning fire. It was not a gesture. 2 Verk frigates at the front of the formation simply stopped existing. The first reduced to a spreading cloud of wreckage before their crew could even register a threat. The second hit in its power core and gone in a silent white flash. On the Verk command deck, no one spoke for nearly 4 seconds. Oven's tactical officer reported the losses with the careful flatness of someone who had never had to report losses before in a first exchange. Oven studied the display. The Iron Song was still moving, not retreating, adjusting position, sliding sideways along the corridor wall in a controlled drift that was already taking it out of the angle his second wave was optimized for. "They predicted the formation," Dreth said quietly. Oven ordered the second wave to adjust and push through. 12 ships, overwhelming broadside. This would end it. Inside the Iron Song, the second wave's approach registered across every screen on the bridge at the same time. Staub called out target priorities without being asked. Dara confirmed them with single-word replies. The ship moved like something that had been in this exact fight before, in its bones, even if none of the crew had. Priya Nail was already doing things in engineering that were not in the standard operations manual. The Iron Song had a power distribution system, designed with 4 primary nodes and 2 backups. Priya had quietly turned it into something with 7 effective nodes by rerouting through systems that were technically not rated for combat loads. The ship's weapon recharge time dropped by 19%. She noted this in her personal log as probably fine. The second Verk wave hit the Iron Song with 6 simultaneous impacts. Deck 4 lost atmosphere. 2 crew members were killed at their stations. The hull groaned in a way that traveled through the entire structure, into the boots of everyone standing on it, into their teeth. The Iron Song destroyed 4 more Verk ships in the following 90 seconds. Below decks, Dr. Sayoni moved through the medical bay with the organized focus of a man who had set up triage in worse conditions. He cataloged every injury, noted every treatment, wrote everything down. It was his job, and also something more. He had a private conviction that this moment mattered and that someone needed to record it accurately. He wrote, "Hour 1, 6 dead, ship damaged, crew not broken, have not seen panic." Something is wrong with my baseline expectations for crisis response, and I think the baseline was always wrong. Gunnery Sergeant Bale sealed Deck 4's emergency bulkheads with 3 of his Marines in suits, moving through the atmosphere bleed with tools and quick patches in the calm way of people who trained for exactly this. Alvin pulled back the second wave. He was not rattled, he did not rattle, but he was recalculating. The human ship had taken 9 significant impacts and was still maneuvering with precision, still firing with accuracy. He ran the damage projections again. By any reasonable model, the Iron Song should have been struggling to maintain basic power. Instead, it was using the corridor wall to its left as cover, drawing the Verk into a narrow firing angle that reduced how many of his ships could engage at once. "They are using the terrain," Dreth said. There was something in her voice that was not quite admiration and not quite alarm. "All ships do that," Orvin said. "Not this quickly, not while taking that much damage." She paused. "I want to look at their homeworld data." "Later, Commander." "Later, Dreth." He ordered a third push, this time with a flanking element. 4 ships swinging wide to come around the debris shelf on the corridor's far side, pressuring the Iron Song from 2 directions. On the Iron Song, Staub saw the flanking maneuver before it developed and said so. Dara told him to prepare for it. There was no alarm in her voice, which was not a performance. She simply did not perform. She was working. By the time the flanking ships came around the debris shelf, the mining drone Staub had deployed 6 hours before were already in position. 4 Verk ships discovered this simultaneously. 2 survived the discovery. The count now stood at Verk Fleet, 39, Iron Song still there. Oven ordered a tactical pause. Around him, his officers were quiet in the careful way of people who were doing math they did not like. He could see it in how they held themselves, the stiffness, the slight over-precision of every movement. They were not afraid, but they were paying attention in a different way than before. Dreth had already pulled the Earth files. She read about the planet's gravity, its predator density during the species' developmental period, the historical conflict record. She read about what a death world built in a creature over hundreds of thousands of years. Then she set the file down and looked at the Iron Song on the display, damaged, listing slightly, absolutely refusing to die, and she felt something she had no good word for in the Verk language. She found a human word for it later in the translation database. The word was dread. There is a specific kind of silence that happens in the deep hours of a battle, not the silence of a lull, but the silence of a system under strain. Every sound on the Iron Song had changed quality. The hum of the engines was slightly lower. The lights on Deck 2 had a flicker in them that Priya had noted and deprioritized. The air recyclers were working harder than their rating and making a faint secondary noise behind their usual tone. 17 people were dead. 41 more were in the medical bay in conditions ranging from treatable to serious. The Iron Song had been in continuous combat for 9 hours. Dara Voss called a 10-minute stand-down when Oven's fleet pulled back for the second time. Not a break. The weapons stayed hot. The sensors stayed active. But 10 minutes for the crew to drink water, eat something, move their hands, remember they had bodies. She had learned this from a commander she served under 15 years ago, who told her that people fight longer if you remind them occasionally that they are people. Staub spent his 10 minutes running a new tactical model. He had found something in the debris field to the corridor's east, a section of the asteroid belt dense enough to mask the Iron Song's engine signature if they held position inside it. It would reduce their firing angles significantly, but it would also make them very hard to target. He brought it to Dara. She looked at it for 30 seconds. "We'd be giving up offensive range," she said. "Yes, but we'd make them come to us, and the corridor narrows there. Fewer ships can engage at once." She thought about it. The fleet was still 13 days out. 13 days was the kind of number that required a different kind of thinking than 6 hours. She approved the repositioning. The Iron Song moved deeper into the corridor's eastern debris shelf, running slow and dark, and found its new position between two asteroid clusters the size of city blocks. Priya noted in her log that the rocks were beautiful up close, old, carbon dark, streaked with pale mineral deposits. She noted this because she was that kind of engineer. On the Verk command deck, Alvin watched the Iron Song's signature dim on his display. Dreth tracked it through the interference and found it, but acknowledged the problem immediately. Firing solutions in that debris field would be difficult. Collateral impacts from misses could create secondary debris clouds. A ship pushing into that zone risked damage from the environment, not just the enemy. "It's bait," Alvin said. "Yes," Dreth agreed. "The question is whether we can afford not to take it." Alvin contacted the Dominion's expansion command on a secure channel. He filed a progress report. In 41 previous engagements, his progress reports at this stage read, "Target neutralized, proceeding to occupation." This one read, "Engagement ongoing, single hostile vessel, status unresolved." He filed it and closed the channel before he had to hear the response. High Adjudicator Kolvar appeared on his secondary screen 20 minutes later. Kolvar was a political officer, which meant his job was to watch campaigns for diplomatic implications. He was thin and precise, and wore his authority like a coat that was slightly too large for him. "One ship," Kolvar said. "Not a question. Just the two words placed in front of Alvin like an object." "One ship," Alvin confirmed. "The Accord is watching this sector," Kolvar said. 17 member species with observation posts within range of this system. I want this resolved quickly." Alvin understood the political geometry. The Verk Dominion's power was not only military, it was reputational. The story of the Dominion was that it could not be stopped. One human ship sitting in a corridor for 9 hours and counting was not yet a problem. One human ship sitting there for 9 days would be a different kind of story entirely. He ordered a new approach. Rather than frontal assault, he would send a probe, not ships, but a specialized Verk infiltration unit transported by a small, fast insertion craft. They would board the Iron Song, disable it from inside, end this quietly. The insertion craft was fast. It moved through the debris field with impressive precision. It reached the Iron Song's hull and attached in under 3 minutes. Gunnery Sergeant Bale had been watching it since it left the Verk formation. He met the boarding team in Corridor 7 with 8 Marines, 2 fixed-point defense positions, and the patient expression of someone who had been hopping for exactly this. The Verk infiltration unit were skilled, trained specialists in close combat, armored, disciplined. They pushed through the first position. They breached the second. They killed 2 of Bale's Marines in the first 90 seconds, and that was simply the cost of this corridor on this day. Then they ran into Bale himself. The Verk had intelligence on human biology. What their intelligence had not fully conveyed was how humans translated that biology into combat. The speed, the tolerance for pain, the particular ferocity that emerges when a human is protecting something they have decided matters. Bale had decided the Iron Song mattered about 8 years ago, the first day he was assigned to it, and nothing in the intervening time had changed his mind. The boarding team was neutralized in 11 minutes. 2 Verk infiltrators survived. Bale put them in the brig personally, which required him to carry one of them because the infiltrator had taken enough damage to make independent movement difficult. He reported to Dara over the comm, "Boarding team neutralized, 2 prisoners, request medical for Corridor 7. Dara acknowledged, then she said, "Good work, Sergeant." Bale, walking back toward his post, said nothing. He was already thinking about where the next one would come from. The 2 Verk prisoners sat in the Iron Song's brig and did not speak, not from stubbornness, from shock. They had been on 47 boarding operations across 12 systems. They had never failed one. They had also never met humans up close before, in the particular context of humans who had just been fighting for their lives for 12 hours and were mildly annoyed about a boarding attempt. Dr. Sayoni came to assess their injuries, because that was what a ship's doctor did regardless of species. He noted professionally that Verk physiology was more robust than the intelligence summaries suggested. He treated the wounds. The infiltrators watched him do it with an expression he could not read but recorded carefully in his notes. One of them eventually spoke. It asked in passable trade language why the ship had not evacuated. Sayoni considered the question. He said, "Because we have not been given orders to evacuate." The infiltrator processed this. It asked, "If you were given the order, would you go?" Sayoni thought about it honestly. "Probably not," he said, "but it would be nice to be asked." He logged this exchange because he logged everything. On the Verk flagship, Oven had stopped filing progress reports. He was doing something he had not done in 11 years of commanding Dominion expansion fleets. He was reading. Specifically, he was reading the full Human Intelligence Archive, which he had previously skimmed in the confident assumption that a thin file meant a thin threat. He now understood that the file was thin because no one had thought humanity worth studying in depth. No one had expected to need the depth. He read about Earth. He read about the evolutionary pressure of a world where almost everything that moved was trying to kill you, and what that did to a species over geological time. He read about the historical record of human conflict, not the interstellar record, which was short, but the internal record, which was enormous. Thousands of years of humans fighting each other, across every possible terrain, in every possible condition, developing and refining and passing down the practice of war in a way that no Dominion client species had ever done. He read a passage from a human military theorist. The goal of war was not to destroy the body, but to destroy the will, and a soldier who accepted death but refused to stop was already victorious. Orvin set the file down. He understood now what had been bothering him since the first exchange with Voss. Every species he had ever conquered had, at some level, been fighting to survive. Survival was the calculation. When the calculation became unfavorable, the species stopped fighting because survival required it. It was not cowardice. It was mathematics. Humans fought with a different equation. They fought for the outcome, not for themselves, but for whatever was behind them. The Iron Song was not fighting for the crew's survival. The crew's survival was secondary. They were fighting for the corridor, for the 14 days, for whoever was on the other side of that transit lane. The math of their own survival was not the math they were using. No formation change addressed this. No volume of firepower changed the fundamental problem. Increasing the threat did not increase the chance of surrender. Dreth entered the command deck and stood beside him without speaking for a long moment. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear it as data, not as an argument." Oven said nothing, which was his way of agreeing. The Accord is broadcasting this engagement in real time. Ambassador Wren's observation vessel has been transmitting to 17 species since Hour 1. Right now, across the galactic community, every major civilization is watching one human ship hold a Dominion fleet for 12 hours. She paused. Whatever happens next, that is already the story. If we destroy the Iron Song, the story is that we needed 47 ships to do it, and it still took us this long. If we withdraw, the story is different. Either way, the Velmora does not happen here. Oven looked at the display. The Iron Song sat in its debris field, powered down to minimum signature, patient as a stone. "What do you recommend?" he said. It was not a question he often asked anyone. "I recommend we stop treating this as a standard engagement," Dreth said, "because it isn't one. It has not been one since the first exchange. We are fighting a different kind of opponent, and we are using the wrong doctrine." Oven was quiet for a long time. Outside, the corridor waited. The asteroids drifted. The Iron Song held position between its two ancient rocks, and every sensor on it tracked every Verk ship with the same absolute, patient attention it had maintained since Hour 1. Kolvar appeared on the secondary screen without being called. His expression had changed, the political precision was still there, but something behind it had shifted. He had been watching the Accord's feeds. He had seen the commentary from the 17 species. He said, "Oven, I have received a communication from the Accord's Coordinating Council. They are formally requesting a halt to engagement pending diplomatic review." Oven looked at him, then at the display, then at Dreth. He did not give the order yet. But for the first time in 11 years of conquest, Fleet Commander Oven of the Verk Dominion was not entirely certain what the correct order was. On the Iron Song, no one knew any of this. They were busy. Priya had found a new problem with the port power coupling and was fixing it with a hand torch and a piece of hull plating she had repurposed from a storage locker. It was, she noted, absolutely going to work. Oven made a decision that his tactical officers would not understand for years afterward. He did not send ships, he sent a message. He opened a direct channel to the Iron Song, not the standard hailing frequency, but a narrow-beam transmission targeted at the command deck, the kind used for private communication between commanders. It was an acknowledgement, in Verk protocol, that the other party was worth speaking to directly. It was a thing the Dominion had not done in living memory. Dara Voss received it and put it on the main screen without ceremony. Oven's face appeared gray-skinned, four-eyed, with the particular stillness of someone who had spent decades making calculated decisions, and was now, possibly for the first time, making an uncalculated one. He said, "You cannot win this engagement, Captain." Dara looked at him steadily. "Define win," she said. Oven paused. It was a short pause, but a real one, the kind that happens when a question lands somewhere unexpected. He said, "Your ship will not survive another sustained assault." "Probably not," she agreed. "Then what are you hoping to achieve?" Dara thought about it for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give him the honest one. She said, 13 more days, that's all. After that it doesn't matter what happens to us." The channel stayed open. Oven looked at her in a way Dreth would later describe as a man recalibrating something fundamental in his understanding of the universe. He closed the channel. Then he made the mistake of ordering a full assault anyway, because 11 years of never retreating is a hard pattern to break, and Kolvar had not yet made the formal political demand, and some part of Oven still believed that enough firepower would eventually produce the outcome he expected. The Iron Song came out of the debris field to meet them. This was unexpected. Every tactical model the Verk had run assumed the human ship would hold its defensive position. Instead, it accelerated toward the Verk formation, closing distance, getting inside the safe firing radius, where the Verk ships risked hitting each other. It was not a suicidal charge. It was a calculated move that turned Oven's numerical advantage into a liability. Chaos spread through the Verk formation. 3 Verk ships fired and hit each other in the confusion. Commanders broke formation without orders. Oven's precise, overwhelming fleet became a crowded problem. Too many ships, too close, with a human warship threading between them like something that had grown up in tight spaces and knew exactly how to use them. The Iron Song took 2 more hits. Deck 7 lost pressure. The starboard sensor array went dark. The ship was listing visibly now, one thruster underperforming, moving with the slightly uneven gait of something that was hurt but had decided not to notice. Priya Nail, in engineering, was doing 4 things simultaneously that should each have required a dedicated technician. She was also talking to the ship, not out loud mostly, but occasionally out loud when something worked, saying things like, "There you go, and stay with me," in the tone of voice usually reserved for living things. The Iron Song responded in the way that ships respond, by not dying. Bale's Marines held the internal breach points. When the Verk tried a second boarding, two insertion craft, different angle Bale was already repositioned. He had anticipated the angle from the geometry of the first attempt. He was waiting. The second boarding team fared worse than the first. On the Verk command deck, Kolvar watched the tactical feed with the expression of a man watching a flood come through his house. The Accord's diplomatic communique had escalated in the last hour. It was no longer a request. It was a formal notice that continued engagement would trigger a review of the Verk Dominion's trade status with 12 member species. He put it in front of Oven without comment. Oven read it. He looked at the display, 5 more of his ships damaged in the last engagement, 2 with significant hull breaches. The Iron Song somewhere in the middle of his formation, still broadcasting its original message on all channels. Dreth said very quietly, "The corridor will still be there. We can renegotiate transit terms. We can come back with a different approach. We cannot come back from what happens to our reputation if this continues." Oven looked at the Iron Song on the tactical display. A ship that should have been debris 3 days ago. A crew that had been in continuous combat since the first volley and had not broken, not bent, not asked for terms. He gave the order to withdraw. It was not a rout. The Verk fleet was disciplined and it pulled back in good order, a controlled disengagement, covering itself with rearguard positioning. But it was unmistakably a withdrawal, and every one of the 17 observation posts in the system recorded it in full, and Ambassador Wren's vessel transmitted it to the Accord with a notation that read, simply, "Single UES vessel, 14 engagements over 3 days, Verk fleet withdrawing." The Iron Song held its position in the debris field and watched the Verk fleet go. On the bridge, no one cheered. They were too tired for it and too aware of the people who weren't on the bridge anymore. Staub looked at his tactical display and then at Dara and said nothing. Dara watched the last Verk ship clear the corridor mouth and then looked at the clock, which read 11 days, 6 hours, 42 minutes until the 6th Fleet's projected arrival. She opened the ship-wide channel. "All stations," she said. "They're pulling back. Good work. Stay at your posts." Then she picked up her water glass, found it empty, and went to refill it. 11 days later, when the UES 6th Fleet came through the outer edge of the Calder system, in full formation, 93 ships, enough firepower to contest a small war. Their lead vessel's sensors found the Iron Song still at its position in the debris field. It was listing at a 7-degree angle. Its starboard sensor array was dark. Hull patches covered 4 separate breach points, each one a slightly different shade of gray, where Priya's improvised repairs had used whatever material was available. One of the running lights on the port side had a slow flicker to it that made it look like the ship was blinking. Admiral Neva Ower, commanding the 6th Fleet from the bridge of the UES Steadfast, looked at the sensor return for a long moment before she hailed. "Iron Song, this is Admiral Ower. We have your position. What is your status?" The response came back immediately, in Dara Voss's voice, which sounded like someone who had not slept properly in almost 2 weeks, but had decided this was not worth mentioning. "Corridor is clear, Admiral. Verk fleet withdrew 4 days ago. We have 2 Verk prisoners in custody, some damage, and a list for engineering." A pause. "It's good to hear you." Neva Ower was not the kind of officer who showed emotion on a bridge. She was known for being composed, precise, and difficult to read. She looked at the sensor return of the battered, listing, somehow still functional Iron Song for another moment, and then she said, to no one in particular, just to the air, "There she is." The 6th Fleet moved into the corridor and assumed defensive positioning, and the Iron Song was escorted to the nearest repair facility at a gentle pace, because pushing its drives past 30% was not advisable. Priya's repairs held. The ship made it. In the days that followed, the numbers came in. The Iron Song had engaged the Verk fleet across 14 distinct combat phases over 3 days and 7 hours. It had destroyed or disabled 26 Verk vessels. The crew losses were 73 dead, 41 with injuries. 238 crew members remained at their posts for the full engagement. Dr. Sione's documentation, every hour logged, every exchange recorded, every decision noted, was transmitted to Earth, to the Accord, and to every major species in known space. It was not written as a heroic account. It was written the way Sione wrote everything, which was carefully and honestly, with specific attention to what was actually observable rather than what a reader might want to be true. Because of this, it was more convincing than a heroic account would have been. The 17 species watching through the Accord's observation network had watched it happen in real time. They had seen the 14 engagements. They had seen the withdrawing Verk fleet. They had seen what one ship, with 300 people, had done for 11 days. The conversation in the Accord's diplomatic channels shifted in ways that would take years to fully measure. On the Verk side, Dreth filed her complete analysis with Dominion High Command. The document was detailed, exhaustive, and deeply uncomfortable in its conclusions. It argued that the Verk's entire expansion doctrine required revision in light of humanity, and that any further engagement with human forces needed to account for a fundamental behavioral difference that could not be overcome with superior numbers alone. High Command reviewed it and filed it in an archive under pending strategic review, which was where uncomfortable documents went to wait. Kovar, having returned to Dominion political headquarters, quietly made contact with a human diplomatic envoy for the first time in 11 years. The conversation was preliminary and careful, and nothing was decided in it. But it happened, which was itself a thing that had not happened in 11 years. Alven wrote nothing. He resumed his duties. He was a professional, but Dreth noticed in the weeks that followed that he had made one change to his command deck. He had added the recording of Dara Voss's voice to the system, just the first broadcast, the one from before the engagement. "This is UES Iron Song. You will not pass." She asked him about it once. He said he found it useful to remember. On Earth, the Iron Song's return prompted the kind of public response that tends to happen when something captures the particular frequency of a civilization's self-understanding. People talked about it not just as a military event, but as a thing that revealed something. There were no simple celebrations. Too many people had died for that, but there was something quieter and more durable than celebration. Admiral Ower's official report to Earth Command concluded with a recommendation for Dara Voss's immediate promotion and a commendation for the full crew, living and dead. A footnote in the report, added by Ower herself in plain language, read, "The Verk have initiated their first diplomatic contact in over a decade. Our analysis suggests this is directly connected to the Iron Song engagement. We did not threaten them with our fleet. We did not threaten them with our weapons programs or our economic leverage. One ship and 312 people held a corridor for 11 days, and the rest followed from that. For the record, they had no orders to hold indefinitely. They simply didn't stop." Dara Voss, asked by a junior officer during the voyage home what she had been thinking during the engagement, the real answer, not the official one, thought about it for a while. She said, "Mostly I was thinking about the next crew that might have to do something like this. I wanted to make sure they knew it was possible." Then she went back to reviewing repair estimates, because the Iron Song needed a lot of work, and she was already thinking about getting it ready.